DuckTales Season 2, Episode 2, titled The Depths of Cousin Feathery. Now, this is one episode that I've been waiting quite a while to see, specifically when the Comic Con images dropped for this season. And we saw that the infallible Feathery Duck would be making his animation debut for the first time ever. Now, getting into the actual episode, we see Dewey being annoyed with Huey and his constant need to just go on ad nauseum about the weirdest and most wacky things. Specifically, a 100 years old stump, and Huey just going on about how old the actual chunk of wood is, with Dewey not giving a care for it. We next see that a tin can on a string is ringing, and we hear the voice of Tom Kenny, who is voicing Feathery Duck in this episode. We also see a great wide variety of other phones, which are Easter eggs in and of themselves. Cape Suzette and other places like that. However, Scrooge discourages the boys from answering that tin can, as he says that is from Feathery Duck, who has a wide tendency to build up a situation and have them go on these massive, wide-spanning adventures, only for it to be about the most mundane things possible, with even Donald going so far as to say that he's a bit of a screwball. Feathery Duck is very much the outgoing thinker of the group, which is made to resonate with Huey himself, and the prospect of adventure gets Dewey himself all riled up for an adventure, and they end up stealing the sub with Launchpad in order to go to meet up with Feathery Duck. As they make their way onto the little what's this called? I guess structure on the sea. Launchpad moors the sub, and we end up with yet another situation where Launchpad will be going off, to have his own private adventure just like in the house of the Lucky Gander, where we met up with another cousin of Donald, specifically Gladstone Gander. So I guess whenever we meet up with another duck relative or one of Donald's cousins, expect a Launchpad side adventure that we're never going to end up seeing. When they do meet up with Feathery Duck, we finally get to see him in all his goofy glory. Now, Feathery has been a character who was introduced in 1964, and we come to find out that the facility that he's taking care of, in reference to that, is an underwater research lab created in 1964. A nice little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, nod, nod, where Feathery first appeared in the Italian comic Topolino, which is actually a big thing for Feathery Duck, where he's just been extremely popular in the European and the Brazilian market, never really showing up in English-speaking countries. Well, at least not that often or to this extent. So that's one of the best things about this series, is that they just keep bringing all these various things from duck lore. But it should have been obvious that something like this would happen, especially considering they took the whole situation with Della Duck from one of those European comics that Donald is a little more popular in. And as they descend on this underwater elevator, so to speak, Dewey starts to go on about the fact that Feathery is very much just like Huey, very eccentric, out there and outgoing, and just kind of weird in general. Although Huey kind of takes this in stride, saying that if he ends up becoming a researcher like Feathery, then it's worth it. However, the elevator starts to get rocked by steam from these um, underground vents on the seafloor that is causing the water around them to become too murky to see what's going on outside. We also see that they are being stalked by this creature in the depths. And as they make their way to this kind of halfway point down further in the sea, they end up going through, and the various members end up being captured by these mutated sea worms. And we end up finding out that the only way to escape their grip and having the body hate basically sucked from them is to treat them with a little TLC, show them a little bit of affection, and they loosen their grip. And as Dewey, who is unable to calm down enough to compliment them, quickly starts to be, squeezed to death, Huey ends up kissing one of the freaking worms in order to get them to retreat. And we end up finding out that the team that Feathery had said he was going to search for to help them make their way further down is actually a small team of krill, bioluminescent krill specifically, who will help them make their way further down into the darkened depths. And as they make their way further towards the underground research lab, we continue to see the shadow looming over him. We also come to find out that Cousin Feathery is also a member of the Junior Woodchucks. And Huey starts to become a little more apprehensive at the thought of seeing any similarities between both him and Cousin Feathery. The fact that they both constantly wear this red cap, which, the handbook says that it's in order to increase their thinking ability or something like that. And that's always been Cousin Feathery's kind of, deal. He's always kind of been more of an eccentric person who has all these old-fashioned homemade remedies in order to, do certain odd things, increase longevity and all these other stuff. And I could easily see Cousin Feathery living hundreds of years simply because he's had all these just weird homemade remedies and weird things that he's just done in order to, just for the sake of doing it. However, as they make their way further towards the underground research laboratory, the line ends up being cut and they can't make their way even further down. However, Feathery suggests that they just go out and swim towards his place in the laboratory, and they use the krill in order to help lead their way. However, once they make their way to Feathery's place, and he shows them what he wanted Donald to come down and see, it ends up being nothing more than rainbow bioluminescent krill. Dewey promptly kind of loses his mind a little bit here, because he's just like, that's what you brought us all the way down here to see? Just krill? More krill? Which is basically what honestly Donald and Scrooge had told them from jump. It's just like Feathery has a tendency to bring them on these dangerous, weird adventures only for it to just be this mundane, just not really worth it things. And we even go as far as to find out that Feathery, despite what Huey had assumed, is not a researcher of any kind. He's just the janitor for the laboratory. And Huey promptly just becomes disillusioned with the whole situation. He doesn't want to be anything like Feathery. He's angry that, they got in such a dangerous situation over someone who wasn't even really worth their time ultimately. However, as the boys go to try to leave, they are set upon by the creature of the deep. And as they make their escape, the underwater facility starts to break apart and be destroyed. They make their way into the elevator and are set upon by the creature, only for Feathery to realize it is one of the krill he used to own, who has been mutated by the underwater gases, much like the worms. Um, Dewey takes this opportunity to try to blind the creature, trying to, get it to go away. However, Feathery rebukes this, saying that just because the creature is different doesn't mean it's bad. Not everything weird is bad, basically being the theme of this entire episode. And him saying that the krill is probably just trying to help them. And as Feathery and Dewey end up fighting over the light, Huey has to make a decision whether to trust in his brother, who has done honestly nothing but kind of put him down for his odd screwball ways, or trust in Feathery, who actually knows a thing or two about this whole situation down here, as he's been on this, he's been under the sea for a good 4 years now. Ultimately, Huey sings to the krill, much like Feathery had done to his own, team of krill, and we end up having the creature just kind of light up, showing that it does understand what Huey is doing, And ultimately, Huey manages to convince Dewey to go along with everything, since they're pretty much gonna die anyway. Ultimately, the krill brings them out of the depths and puts the elevator on the top of the platform. And, Huey ends up just being like, it was trying to save us all along. Thank goodness we were able to make it out of this safely and all that good stuff. And Feathery ultimately decides that he will kind of take Huey's influence, more or less, and try to actually become a deep sea researcher himself, and just a scientist overall, and goes off with a massive krill. Huey ends up being okay with the fact that he's very similar to Feathery, but still thinks he's one weird duck, if nothing else. We also get to see the end of Launchpad's little side adventure, where he bids farewell to his mermaid love of the deep, and as everyone recounts the fact that each had their own special adventure, Huey remarks that they should probably take this opportunity to plan on how to tell Donald that this was all Louie's idea. And that ends our episode. A very fun episode. Cousin Feathery was really fun. I honestly am glad he was voiced by Tom Kenny, because, it had to either be Tom Kenny or Weird Al Yankovic. I would have accepted no other substitutions for the weirdness that is Cousin Feathery. I hope this isn't the last time we see him, or that we're just going to keep a theme of just meeting one cousin per season, but if I remember correctly, DuckTales has been at least renewed for a third season, so we'll see. Gladstone didn't even show up during the finale, so who knows if this is the last time we'll see Feathery, or if he'll make a return later on in the season with a new host of other members of the Duck Clan. It's good to see both the Maduck side of things and the regular Duck side of things, because there's that division in Donald's family line, where you have, Scrooge McDuck and his people and the Clan McDuck, but then you have the regular Duck side of things who, basically founded Duckburg with Gladstone Gander, Feathery Duck, Ludwig von Drake. They're all on that side of things. And if anybody has watched the Three Caballeros, Legends of the Three Caballeros, his great-grandfather from that was also introduced, who is also a part of the Duck family who founded Duckburg. So it's very interesting to whenever you get to actually see something from the more deeper comic book lore that, never really made it outside of the European market or comics in general. This gives me faith that one day we might actually get to see Donald's superhero alter ego, Peppernick, or as he is called in the American market, at least as far as the video game went, PK Quack. But that's enough of me gushing over my weird knowledge of duck things. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think about this episode and Cousin Feathery as a whole? Are you starting to wish we would actually get to go along with some of Launchpad's side adventures? Because I know I am. I'd actually like to see what's going on with Launchpad, you know? Fun adventures and all that is all good, but, you know, I would at least like one of his side adventures to actually maybe be him going off with Darkwing Duck, finding out that he's more than just a TV series, he is in fact a real character. We'll see. Time will tell. This series has a tendency to always throw me for a loop in what to expect. But, you know, hey, if you liked what I had to say in this episode, leave me a like and a dislike if you didn't, and tell me what I'm doing wrong, and subscribe for more DuckTales episodes. Thanks for joining me.